Kindly mute yourselves so that. So I told you that for comprehension questions, the candidate can lift a whole paragraph and the examiner picks the relevant part. The answer can be written anywhere within the question paper. Anywhere within the question paper, as long as you give directions, okay? You say, this is my answer for 3B. I am supposed to mark that. So if you feel that you have lots of material, do not shy away from writing that material because you're afraid that that is not going to be marked. If you have more points, write them. They will be marked. Look for any available space and write your answers there. Remember, our main intention is to get as many marks as possible. Then candidates are not penalized for grammatical errors and spellings in question 1, except in summary and grammar questions. I think I have explained that very well. So that brings us to the end of question 1. Let's go to the exact question. I will receive reactions after this presentation. So let me first finish up everything, then you can ask questions. Just note somewhere any question that you have, then we will handle it at the end of this presentation. Thank you for being with me so far. So the exact question, the areas tested, passages picked from either the compulsory text, this is either the novel or the play. I am happy to say that we know that this year, the exact question will be drawn from Blossoms of the Savannah. Then focus here is on the episodic scenes. You know, those important scenes in the text. And I know you have the episodes of Blossoms of the Savannah, right? You know the important areas, the important scenes of the text. Just familiarize yourselves with them. But then I always tell my students that for you to be in a position to answer very well this question, you need to have read Blossoms of the Savannah not less than 5 times. How many times have we read Blossoms of the Savannah? How many times? Let us be honest, because you know God can see us. How many times have we read Blossoms of the Savannah? How many times? Who has done it 5 times? Even in my class, they've not done it 5 times. How many times? 4 times? 4 times Blossoms. Jesus Christ. 3 times? So we are remaining with how many times? And we are promising that we are going to do it, right? Are we promising that you're going to do that book 2 more times? Before God and before man? Yes? Good, because it is for our own good. You will not say that you can effectively get these 25 marks if you do not know this text like the back of your hand. You must know it so well. Such that, you know, you encounter candidates that are even able to quote the pages. Yes, where they got the illustrations. Yes, and don't say they enter the exam room with those books. They've just read the book as many times as possible. It is imprinted in their brains, and that is what I want for us. Let's read that text. These are easy marks for us to get. So focus on episodic scenes. How is it tested? So here you'll get a variety of questions that capture plot development. No, plot development is the sequence of events in a novel, in a play. Characterization, be asked about character traits. Character traits. And you know, Blossoms has so many characters, right? Yeah, so you need to really remember them and know their character traits. Then the themes. Now, under character traits, you can be asked to discuss one character, or you could be told to compare. In comparing, you're giving similarities in traits between 2 characters. So you need to begin with both are, right? Or the 2 of them. because there are two characters that you're comparing, and they must share the same character trait. So after giving the character trait, you must illustrate. I forgot to say this at the beginning of this paper, that this is a paper that is about illustrations. You identify, you must illustrate. You give an answer, you must prove that it is the correct answer. You fail to illustrate, then you fail to get all the marks. So you could be told to compare characters or contrast characters. Now, in contrasting characters, you're giving the differences. So you're saying, while Resian is focused, Tayo is what? Is correct and focused, right? Yeah. And this is when Joseph Amwat comes in. You know, Resian is still adamant that education is key. She's not even interested in the informal education that Amwat is giving them. But Tayo has fallen in love, you know? And you know what love does to people? She stops thinking about education and she's happy with the dance and music that Resian is teaching, not Resian, that Joseph Pamwat is teaching them. So look at that. So this is contrasting. We need to see that. And after you've written that Tayo is unfocused, maybe that is the excerpt that has been brought, that particular part, because later on we see her focus shifting, right? She becomes a different person, but you know, your answers are geared towards that particular passage that you've been given. So when you say that she's unfocused, you have to give illustrations why, and you also have to give illustrations why you find Resian focused. Am I making sense? Then after that, there are themes. Last year, this was a very general question. What are the themes? Let me see, 2019. The themes, it was a general question, which ensured that candidates could pick a theme from even another part of the play and score. But then, when the question is tied, what is the main theme in this passage? Main theme means the one that runs in that passage. The major theme, not the minor theme. So it means that you have to be very careful here. You have to get the central theme, the central idea that is being passed. You give a minor theme here, you will not score because the answer is very, very specific. Do you understand? And when you give this theme, you must illustrate it. You must illustrate it for you to score full marks. For you to score full marks, you must illustrate the theme. If it is what is the main theme in this passage, 2 marks. Don't give 2 answers. Here we are looking for 1. Are we there? What are the main themes? 4 marks. How many themes are you giving here? 2 main themes. 2 main themes. What are the main themes? 4 marks. You can give 2 or 3 or even 4 and illustrate. Because the question is not tied, you can play around with the examiner. Play around with the examiner a little. Write more. Because maybe your point number 1 is not correct and you want to score. Do the second one and maybe the third one to be safe. But if they say, give 2 main themes, now you're tied. You must give 2. Do you understand? Good. Then, of course, there's paraphrasing. We've talked about that. Then there's semantics, you know, meanings of words. And then a grammar question. We've seen that. Let's look at the tips. I think I've been talking about them. What happens immediately before or after the excerpt? This is where the candidates are asked to place the excerpt in its immediate context. In this question, do not go way back. Go immediately before. What are the events? What are the main events that precede this excerpt? And what is it that happens immediately after? So don't go to events that are very far. tie yourself to what is happening at that particular, just immediately before. Just immediately before and immediately after. Then, number 2, put the extract in its immediate context. I've talked about that candidates are expected to say what happens before and what happens after, and each point scores 1 mark. 1 mark. In most cases, this question will have 4 marks. 2 for before and 2 points for after. 2 points for after. Now, you are not tied in your answers in this question. You can write everything that you think happens before. It is the work of the examiner to mark those points. So don't tie yourself, because you may tie yourself and you've given the wrong answers. Maybe those that you're leaving out are the correct answers. And our main aim, remember, is to get marks. So write as many as you can. Write as many as you can for before and after. Each point scores 1 mark. Hint, check on the opening statement or the speech or the ending to have an idea. No, the first sentence will take your mind back to what happens before. Take note of it. Look at also the last sentence of your passage. It will give you a clue of what happens immediately after. Is that understood? Now, the challenge here is students go beyond the context, and others fail to appreciate the passage and interact with the content. That is the challenge. That is the challenge. Now, in questions on style, you could be asked, which are some of the stylistic devices that have been employed in the passage? This is how the writer communicates, right? We know that style is about how does the writer present his message. Themes are the message, right? Whereas style are the way that the message is presented. So, what are the stylistic devices? Remember, you're tackling the stylistic devices that are in that passage, not those that you tackled in other chapters. Tie yourself to that excerpt. Do not go beyond unless you are asked to do that by the question. When you give the stylistic device, you get 1 mark. Then you illustrate, you get another mark. Now, illustrating is giving an example from the passage to prove that that stylistic device that you're giving is actually there. But then the examiner may want something else from you. They may want you to tell them the effect, the use of that stylistic device. Why did the writer decide to use it and use it there? What is the impact of having that stylistic device? Am I making sense? So you need to bring that out. This happens where you are told maybe give 2 stylistic devices that have been employed in this excerpt, 6 marks. So 1 mark will be for identification, the other mark for illustration, and the 3rd mark will be for the effect. The 3rd mark will be for the effect. For instance, listen to this dialogue. There's a dialogue. Okay, let's say, for example, the passage has a dialogue in it. Maybe there's dialogue between Tayo and Resian. And in that dialogue, you are able to see how focused and determined Resian is. So when you're writing the effects, you will say this dialogue is meant to bring out how focused and determined Resian is in her pursuit of education. Or it's meant to bring out the contrasting character traits between Resian and Tayo in their pursuing of education. Are we together? That whereas Resian is focused, resolute, determined in her desire to get, university education, Resian's desire, goes down a little bit with the coming in of Joseph Pamwat. So that is the effect. That is the impact of that usage. Another thing is that dialogue will break the monotony of continuous prose. So maybe the writer decides to use it to break that monotony. Or maybe through this dialogue, tension is relieved. Maybe a very serious issue like FGM was being tackled, you know, the circumcision of girls. So a dialogue is brought in that has some humor in it, right? To relieve the tension that we are experiencing in that particular, you know, part of the excerpt. So you write that as the effect to relieve tension, for comic relief, you know, that needs to be brought out. Now, the challenge here for most students is that candidates stroke unrelated styles and give one illustration. You'll find someone saying there's a simile, stroke, metaphor. And then they illustrate for one and they give the effect of one. In such a case, you score 0. Do you understand? Why? Because you are telling the examiner you don't know the difference between the two. We don't know whether the illustration you've given is for the metaphor or the other one. And we also don't know whether the effect is for the first one or the second one. You have to be very specific in your answers. Give one answer. Illustrate that answer. Give the effect of that one. Move to the other one. Understood? Am I making sense? Good. Then we have themes. You have to identify the theme and illustrate. I talked about that. If you ask for the main theme, you have to give the central theme. The central theme. But if you just ask for themes, not main, not minor, give all of them, okay? You'll score marks. So illustration alone does not score, but identification alone can score. Are we together? If you illustrate, but you have not identified, you're not likely to score. The challenge here is that candidates also stroke themes, but only illustrate one, which does not score. Moreover, candidates give minor themes when asked for the main theme. I talked about that. Have you finished copying that? Now, in characterization, oh, forgot to tell you this, themes are nouns. You can never give a noun that is a theme that is an adjective or an adverb. Themes are nouns. When you're giving themes, they must be nouns. Character traits use adjectives. And we do not give character traits using negative statements. We don't say Resian is not hardworking. We say what she is. Okay? Don't use negative statements in giving character traits. Use an adjective. Or you say Tayo is not lazy. Instead of saying Tayo is not lazy, tell us Tayo is hardworking. Tayo is hardworking. You have to do that for you to score marks. So take note that the same way that illustration alone cannot score for style, cannot score for themes, illustration alone in characterization cannot score. The challenge here is that candidates stroke many traits, but only illustrate for one, which does not score. Then when asked to compare characters, state and illustrate the characters shared. When told to contrast characters, then words of contrast must be used because you are contrasting. Resian is, but Tayo is. Are we there? The word of contrast there is which one? But. Very good. But. So here there are no penalties for grammatical errors on spelling except, listen carefully, except if in that spelling you bring a different meaning to your sentence. Okay? You will not be penalized for spelling mistakes unless your spelling error leads to a factual error. Unless it leads to an error in your sentence. That is, the meaning changes. The semantics of the sentence change. So in such a case, then you'll be penalized. You'll be penalized. However, stylistic devices must be spelled correctly. They must be spelled correctly. Are we there?
Yes.
Good. Now we have factual and textual errors, misspelling characters' names. Instead of someone saying Nora, you say Dora. You know, Dora is a different person who is not found in that book. So anything you say there about Dora is zero, because you don't have anyone called Dora in the text. Are we there? Instead of Resian, somebody says, you know, this one is very prevalent here. You know, we we like using L, eh? We like using L, but it's okay. Then instead of saying Tayo, you say who? Taiwo. Who is Taiwo? No, that is what the examiner will ask. Who is Taiwo? Who is this Taiwo you're talking about? Because I don't have such a character in the text. So you have to be very careful about spellings. Then failure to identify the demands of the question. The demands of the question. Write this one down so that you do it during your own time. Check what the question demanded. 2E and F of 2016. In most cases, this happens when you give less answers than the marks given. So in such a case, you are not likely to score. Then stroking character traits, themes, and styles. Candidates may stroke answers thinking they are related. Then they fail to explain, illustrate on both. E.g., kind stroke generous. You know, these are different traits. They are different traits. So if you say someone is kind, you need to illustrate for that alone. Generous alone. Merciful stroke sympathetic. You know, then there is satire stroke sarcasm. Very different ideas, right? And you have to bring them out. You have to bring them out. Now, I want to say something about irony. Irony as a stylistic device. Irony as a stylistic device. First of all, we know there are different kinds of irony. There is verbal irony, where you say something and you don't mean it. You don't mean it. For instance, if I say, I did not like the way you received me this morning. I did not like the way you received me this morning. Do I actually mean this? No, because you people received me well, right? Yes. And by the way, did I say thank you? Thank you. Yes. So, you know, that is verbal irony. I am saying that, but that is not what I mean. I say, boys, this room is very dirty. But then look at it. This is a very clean room, right? I'm just being ironical. I am saying something that I do not mean. I wish my girls could see this room. They would know that boys are clean, huh? Because there's this misconception that boys are very careless. But you can see, this is that is Mombone girls. They're the ones making noise. Okay. Anyway, they should not make noise for us. This is very serious business. Anyway, so what we're actually saying is that, you know, when you say that the class is dirty, while in the actual sense it is clean, you're simply saying that, you're simply using verbal irony. You're simply saying, or you're simply using verbal irony. Then we have situational irony, where something happens that is contrary to our expectations. Where, let's pay attention. Stop looking at the girls. This is more important. This is more important. So I was saying that situational irony, something happens that is contrary to our expectations. For instance, can you imagine, I'm your guidance and counseling teacher. I've always been telling you that don't abuse drugs, don't take alcohol. Then one day I come and I'm staggering, you know, all over the compound. That is situational irony, you know? You're like, seriously? You mean she takes alcohol? Something is happening that is contrary to your expectations. Because furthermore, that is not how you'd expect me as your teacher and your mother to behave, right? Yes, so look at that. Then we have dramatic irony. Not dramatic irony. We know something that the characters in the novel do not know. Do not know. I am emphasizing this because it was tested. It was tested in 2016, where students were asked, what is the dramatic irony in the text? So you need to know this, that something is happening in the text. You as the reader knows it, but the characters in the text are unaware of it. Now, whenever you discuss irony, and I want you to be very keen on this, there must be words of contrast in your answer. Words such as yet, but, however, whereas, while, you're trying to contrast the things that are happening. That must be brought out. So with that, we come to the end of not paper 2, but question 2. Question 2, the exact question. So we go to poetry. We go to poetry. And I know most students find this area very challenging, but this is very easy. I tell students that if you want to pass in poetry, love poetry. Do not go there with a formed opinion that poetry is difficult. You're able to even score very well in poetry if you have a positive attitude. Just like it, enjoy it, have fun as you're reciting that poem, okay? And you'll find it very easy for you. If you love something, it loves you right back, right? Yeah, you love something, it also loves you. So love poetry, it will also love you, and you'll get the results, very good results in this. So what is tested in poetry? Poems picked from contemporary and emerging issues in the country or in the world by poets from Africa, European, and Caribbean poets. How is it tested? Here you get a variety of questions that capture meaning of the poem, either the literal or the implied meaning, characterization, themes, the message in the poem, themes or the message in the poem, the style. You could be taught to paraphrase not a paragraph. In poetry, you don't have paragraphs. We have stanzas, right? So you could be taught to paraphrase a stanza or a line. You could be asked questions on mood, tone, attitude, no semantics. Semantics is vocabulary questions where you give the meanings of words, or even a grammar question. Now, I want to give you steps to follow. Steps that you need to follow when doing this question. Number 1, read the poem carefully. Read the poem carefully several times to ensure that you understand it. Read the poem carefully several times to ensure that you understand it. Now, as you read this poem, do not take any word, any line for granted, because each is important. Because remember, we said that in poetry, you choose words carefully because there's a reason, right? There's always a reason why the writer decided to use this word and not any other. So that should be well known to you, that no word should be taken for granted. Each is very, very important. So you read the poem the first time to get the literal meaning, the surface meaning. What is it about? What is it about? Then you do a second reading. And as you're doing the second reading, you ask yourself the following questions. Is there a title? Because the title is very important. It could help you know what the poem is about. It could give you a clue of who the persona is. So don't take the title for granted. It's important. It's important. It could highlight for you who the persona is. It could help you understand or interpret the poem. So look at the poems that have been tested so far. We have The Outcast. We have The Outcast that was tested some time back. Touch, A Jolly Good Boss, The Road Not Taken, And 2018, the man he killed. This one we are going to go through. Okay? The man he killed. And as you're looking at the title, ask yourself, is the title symbolic? Is it symbolic or is it literal?